So, welcome back to the 1760 sessions where we talk to founders building systems and impact. I'm Harry from 1760 Strategic AI, and today I'm joined by the awesome Brian Wygle, a corporate fixer, turnaround specialist, and interim CEO with over 40 years of experience helping business owners nationwide navigate the stress, growth, and exit. Brian's held CFO roles in companies ranging from 10 million to 150 million across multiple industries. Um, Now runs the fabulous Help for My Company, where he coaches, consults, and fixes problems for privately held businesses. Brian, that was a lengthy intro, as I like to do. Thank you very much for being here. Have I missed
Yeah.
anything?
Yes, everything's great. Um, I think you got it all. Just one last thing. Last name is pronounced Wygle. I know
Wygle.
it's spelled like Wiggle, but it's
Okay.
pronounced Wygle.
Wygle.
So
Is Wygle potentially Danish or anything?
it is Norwegian.
Okay. Okay.
From a German background, my father's family was Norwegian.
Okay, I thought it had a slight ring to it.
Yeah.
So kicking off with apologies, I'll call you
No,
Wygle,
no worries. You know what? I grew up with that, so I don't even correct people anymore.
of course. So you call yourself. We spoke about it last time.
Hmm.
We had a pre-call. You call yourself a corporate fixer. Can
Hmm.
you walk me through the origin story here? What was the ever fixed, and when did you realize this was your thing?
Um, the first thing I ever fixed, before I even thought about going into business, was a restaurant. Um, I had started my career young. I was 21 years old, and at, I had just gotten my real estate license, and I thought I was going to make a career in real estate to supplement my music background. Um, and There was a restaurant across the street from our office, and I would go in there and eat lunch, and I noticed things were deteriorating. And so one day I said something to the manager, just a suggestion. And unbeknownst to me, he was getting ready to quit. So he threw his apron on the table and said, "If you think you can do better, you do it." So I ended up managing the restaurant for about 8 months. There was an absentee owner, and he basically said, "Yeah, you can, if you've got some ideas, run this business because I don't know what we're doing." So that was my first fixing it. I ran it for 8 months, got it back into a shape where he could sell it.
Okay,
Um,
wow.
didn't realize that's what I was going to be doing because I went back into the real estate, then drifted into business banking from real estate, mostly following my manager from a real estate company to a lender. And I kept seeing businesses getting turned down for loans and developed the theory on my own that most of them were not prepared to borrow, or they had problems that they couldn't identify that they just thought money would fix. And so it began a process of helping entrepreneurs and smaller businesses to write a better business plan, identify the problems, come up with solutions, make themselves bankable. Um,
Yeah,
and and so that kind of just led into a career of that through actually into investment banking on the fix it to sell it concept, helping people fix their
yeah,
company so they could sell it. Um, I gave up the actual investment banking. Um, I don't know, about 10 years ago when the regulatory environment and having all these securities licenses and all that, and I was finding that I was competing with some of my best sources of referrals, were the other investment bankers who were saying, "I'd like to sell this company, but they got so many problems." Um, And that just kind of led into attorneys or accountants or investment bankers calling and saying, "Hey, I have this client that could really benefit from talking to you." Uh, and several of them over the time have said, "Will you be our interim CEO or our interim CFO?" Um, and so my model was kind of all over the place. It was like whatever the client needed to fix, I was diving in.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Nowadays, with the generational change as people are getting older, business owners are getting older and they have kids who don't want the business. There's a lot of family dynamics. So I kind of become a little bit of a psychologist, even though I'm not trained for that. Uh, Business psychologist, trying to understand the whys, where it's impacting, where they're having issues. And fixing is really more the concept. I don't refer to myself too much as a turnaround guy.
Okay.
Uh, uh, Turnaround in the turnaround marketplace, to differentiate, most consultants, turnaround advisors that I interact with are more on the financial side, specifically, dealing with bankruptcies or reorganizations, um, from a financial aspect. Let's, cut costs, that type of thing. Me, I take a little bit more of a holistic approach. Let's find what the problems are and fix them one by one.
Okay. And I can
So
imagine there's a lot of uh, times when you get hired on to fix a certain problem, and you
mhm.
potentially you uncover more problems that are bigger than the initial problem you've been hired on to fix.
I have a client right now that I'm beginning the final stages of exit by training someone to replace me. Um, I came in because their attorney, they went to their attorney and said, "I think we need to file bankruptcy." It's a family-owned business, and the family didn't get along, and they were just, the company was just falling apart, and they couldn't seem to get off the dime. The attorney said, "Talk to Brian first." Long story short, I ended up having to take a part-time interim role as their general manager because I had to say, "All of you just need to get out of the way. Let's fix this business."
Yeah.
Um, didn't intend to stick around that long, but COVID hit,
Yeah.
and so then I had to help them through that. And so they've been a client for 10 years, and there's always something to fix. And like I said, we try and fix one problem uh, at a time. Um, Business owners often, unfortunately, when things start going smoothly, start going back to their old habits, and the problem pops up again. And I've had multiple clients over the years where we got something fixed, we got it going, they're starting to make a profit, everything's running smoothly, and then they think, "Oh, I can do this." They slip back into their old ways. A year later, I'm getting called to come back and fix the exact same problem. And
Okay.
while that's good repeat business, in my business, that's not so good. you know. Um,
Of course. And there's probably an element where you want to transfer some skills over to them so they don't want to keep falling into the same pitfalls.
right? Yeah. The number one thing that I do is I try and help people look at things differently. Um, Change their way of thinking, and that's probably the biggest challenge with any business owner or executive. They've risen to a certain level. Uh, their thinking is embedded. Um, I have a quote I throw around a lot. Einstein said, "You can't fix a problem using the same thinking you used to create the problem."
Yeah.
And so a lot of times it's a fresh perspective. Um, it's trying to help people manage change. Uh, Business owners can get very trying to find a polite word for it, hurt when they realize that what they were doing isn't working and that there's a better way. They think they're the leader. uh, Comes with the territory. You built
Yeah,
a
it does.
business, you know and so that's kind of the gist of what my genesis. And I'm trying to apply that now more to uh, virtual, as we talked about. um, uh, all the traveling puts a lot of strain on you, and it's not very cost effective
Yeah.
for the client.
I remember I was having this conversation. It's like traveling is one huge upside of the business world. Sometimes
Mm.
it's like, look, you go get to meet people face
Mhm.
to face, see the whites
Mhm.
of their eyes,
Mhm.
interpret their body language. And I think we said that it's a great thing, but it also takes out potentially a whole day. It
Yeah.
could take out more than one day of travel. The US is vast, and getting anywhere is not particularly easy as it would be in the UK, which everything is a train ride away. And
Right.
furthermore, you're losing out on the opportunity to meet with other clients.
Yes.
So it's that sort of there's a thin line between them where you want to get them.
Right. Well, it's also not cost effective to the client.
Yeah,
Um, there are times you have to be there, and but if I'm going to have a 2-hour meeting with a client, and I've got to get on a plane, fly there, stay in a hotel, have the 2-hour meeting, get on a plane, and fly home, I'm not doing that on my dime.
yeah,
So the customer's paying for that. Um, and so I'm trying to be more cost effective to my clients because generally they're in some form of distress to begin with, and so my being an additional cost, I better be helpful.
yeah.
So where I can, I'm learning to do it more virtual. You have
Where's the furthest you've had to travel for a client?
uh, Canada,
Okay.
but not just straight up Canada, the far side of Canada. For a long time, I was commuting to Cincinnati for 2 weeks at a time for about 2 years, dealing with a client. That wasn't that far, but it is far in the sense that it's one of those places it's hard to get there from here. We have places in the United States that you think, oh, that's great, but you've got to take two airplanes, two
Yeah.
different flights to get there. You've got to drive to from heat for me, it's a 30-45 minute drive to the airport, get on a plane. Uh, if it
And
doesn't fly direct,
the change is never normally like sort of linear. It's always
yeah,
probably nip across to somewhere like Atlanta where it has a big
right,
airport and then go another direction.
right. Yeah, we used to joke when I had a partner, we used to joke that Delta stands for delivering every living thing through Atlanta, because it seemed like no matter where you were, if you were on Delta, you were going to stop in Atlanta before you went to something else.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a crazy airport to get through. So,
Yeah, it is. Even myself, I was traveling to Portland a lot over the past couple of
mhm,
years. My old business was
mhm.
headquartered in Portland. It was always Atlanta first. And
Yes.
I liked it. It had a good food court, but that's
Oh
just
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's difficult for the clients. Sometimes it's not productive when you can just jump on a call. Um, I have a client in Fort Worth,
yeah,
and we just have a 1 hour call once a week because that's all he needs. He just needs to, I'm trying to help him learn how to do what he needs to do. So we spend a little time in review. We find out what's not working. We make some adjustments, and you know he goes on his day, and I don't have to fly to Fort Worth. He doesn't have to come here. He doesn't have to give up his whole day to entertain me because I'm there. So for me, that's kind of the model I'm
yeah.
focusing on for the future
This
is that blend, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome, and yeah, it's your adaptability, which is
Mhm.
important in this day and age because the
Right.
world is moving so fast in terms of the way people communicate and the technology that we have at our
R
fingertips. This very
Well,
much relates to what you said to me. I recall you saying, you have a very different approach to a big consulting firm, and it's quite similar to 1760, whereas a big consulting firm you
mhm,
have a first point of contact, and they usually send someone junior, and it's also feels a bit disintegrated, and you don't have that relationship.
right.
And I think to quote you, you said you don't do charts and graphs.
Yeah.
You talk to people, you get in the room, whether it's virtual and in person.
Mhm.
And where does that philosophy kind of come from? Where have you learned that in your experience?
Um, well, you know, I I would have to say that, growing up with the dream of being a professional musician, taught me very differently, to think differently than, the typical left-brain businessman. Um, I've I've sat in a ton of meetings, uh, where there's a lot of charts, a lot of graphs, a lot of, corporate speak, if you will.
Yeah,
Um,
jargon.
and then I find that a lot of people hide behind that, especially consultants, when they don't really know. They've never run a business. They've never, they're there giving you their best ideas, and a lot of that came out of a textbook,
Yeah,
you know. Um, and I just found that what people really need, at least my clients really need, is someone to talk to, someone to hear them, challenge them to look at it differently, I love the light bulb moments when the light goes on in the client and or their employees, and they say, "Wow, that we can do,"
Yeah.
and watch them scramble to implement.
And this leads perfectly into the next question I had lined up for you. And we spoke about the difference between what people and why people. Um,
Hmm.
can you explain that sort of distinction and how it shows up in your
Right.
work? Because the light
Yeah.
bulb is someone who's more of a they've got to that why, whereas the what
Yeah.
people on the other side of things.
Right. Yeah. So one of my pithy little things that I picked up over the years is that when you're dealing with people in a work setting in particular, um, they can be people can be classified into two kinds of people. There are what people and there are why people. What people are people you tell them what we're going to do, what needs to be done. You give them the instructions and they go implement it. Um, and most people are what people. They're very comfortable in that situation. Why people are the kind of people that you can explain to them why we're doing what we're doing, why something is happening, more the philosophical concept, the vision of what you're trying to accomplish, and then you can leave them to find a way to make that happen when they get the why. And the hardest thing is to convert what people into why people, opening their eyes to new ways of thinking. Um, Sometimes it's uh, I have another little phrase. In the old days, I talked about management by wandering around. Get up and wander around out in
Yeah.
the people. My concept is more management by wondering why. So if I pose a philosophical question to employees, um, or I pose a vision, this is where we're going. This is what we need to accomplish, and this is what it's going to look like when it's finished. Now let's fill in the steps. How are we going to get there? You'll find that people are pretty creative, especially if you have, good employees. So a lot of times I'm having to deal with my clients' employees on their behalf because they're not leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most business owners did not go to Harvard and then decide to start a business doing whatever it is they do. Somebody makes a really good product, or they're a good contractor, or they're a good salesperson or whatever, and the business builds around them as they have to add in people, um, and they're not really trained to be leaders. Um, some are leaders. Some people are leaders naturally, but I find a lot of business owners uh, have a hard time motivating their employees, especially when things aren't working the way they've always worked, or when there's you know a death in the family, or it could be a problem to fix. Especially if that family member was in the business, it impacts the business. So the what people and why people is really about um, seeking out those who can think for themselves, um, and giving them the vision of where it needs to go. Um, I've written an article that's been kicked around. It's probably on my website, um, on the 5 E's of leadership, and I implement this with my clients. Uh, the first thing is the definition of a leader is someone who has followers. If nobody's following you, you're not leading. You're probably in the wrong position. Um, but the role of a leader is to envision, equip, empower, and encourage. And um, sorry, that's four. Uh, Counting is not my strong suit, but is to share the vision. This is here's the promised land. This is where we're going. This is the change we're making.
Yeah.
To equip them, to make sure they have all the tools that they need to do the job, whether it's financial instructions, hardware, whatever. Empower. The owner of a business or a leader is really the only one who can break down interdepartmental barriers to get people to work together, um, to uh, give them permissions when they don't feel like they have permission. Uh, Sometimes the business dynamic has to change, so you have to empower them. And then the last one is encouraging them, and that's both positive and negative. The word encourage basically means to come alongside.
Yeah.
So to give them strength, to give them courage, but also correction when they're doing something wrong. Everybody wants to be a nice person. They don't want to correct, or some people are just not nice people and they don't want to encourage. So I try to implement that culture um, into that, bolt into that the why people who, once they get that, they get why to do it. They can come back and say, I would say we'd do this if they'd let me. And so then I can go to the client and say, hey, your guy down in the warehouse has this really good idea of how to fix this, but we need to empower him to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that,
It's there's so much to unpack there. It's like
yeah,
you're educating, coaching, and cheerleading at the same time.
yeah,
And there's been instances in the past where I've worked for leaders that have built a fantastic product, built a company, but then they get to the top and they're like, okay, I've never done this before. Where do we go next? And
right,
it's more often than not at some of these tech companies I've worked for, the board will bring in someone else to come and take over who has experience in it. But then
right,
the founder will still have a stake, and it's important probably coach that person effectively to be like, right, you're still a massive part of this. This is your organization, but you just need that slight
right.
gentle commercial shift or whatever it may be. And furthermore, I was thinking about the first thing you said about what people and why people. And I just want to challenge you on this because I just want to make my understanding is 100%. You can have a why person and a what person. And a why person is someone that's asking why they're doing it. The what person is someone asking what they do. Is that what
Mhm.
person sometimes already been a why person because they know why they're doing it? They're just asking what they're
Right.
doing. And it's
Well,
often
yeah. So
this
trying
person.
to get, yeah, trying to get what people to think to become why people, but also a lot of people are why people who don't do anything about it, and you got to get them to become what people. Um, but in terms of dealing with them, it's really for me why people are not so much that they're questioning; they are people that you can explain why something needs to be done or what it's going to
Yeah.
look like, and that person can come up with their own their own way of doing it, as opposed to me needing to give a what person a list of tasks. Um, I have an assistant at one of the companies that's been assigned to me, and she started out an incredible what person, very efficient, but she does the same rote tasks every day, and she still has to look at her checklist. You know, initiating a project. Okay, I got to go through my checklist. I've spent a lot of time with her trying to, and she's come a long way into becoming the kind of person who I can say, here's why we're doing this. Here's not so much what to do, that she's much more comfortable finding her own way to get it done and more efficiently. So that's kind of the whole what and why thing for me.
Okay, so it's a guiding phase where you guide
Yeah,
people through it.
yeah.
Okay. And look, your background, you mentioned me before, you come from Lean, Six Sigma. How
Mhm.
does that add to the why we're doing this discipline
W-
translate when you're working with a family-owned business that's done the same thing in their own way for 20
Right.
years?
I sum up with and I've kind of bounced around the periphery. I'm not a black belt in Six Sigma or whatever, but I've been exposed to it enough and I've worked enough with it that I summarize it to those who are not familiar with it this way. Uh, Everything you do in your business, you need to ask your question: is this process, is this step, is this thing I'm doing bringing value to the end product that the customer receives or service in such a way that they perceive that value and are willing to pay for it? If not, can we cut it out, shorten the steps? Uh, because at the end, if we're doing something because it's the way we've always done it, or there's 5 steps to get to something that the customer only perceives the one step, how much of that can we lean out
Yeah.
and go directly? And a lot of times, that's where the why people step in. When you explain to that and say, why are you doing that? Well, we've always had that step. And is it really necessary? And by necessary, I mean, does the end user or the customer perceive some kind of value to that step that you had to do? Um, Whether it's, we always polish our product at the end before we put it in the box, and the customer thinks that's fantastic, so we get a little premium price from our competitor, or whatever. Um, if not, why are we doing it? Why do we do that step? And I do a lot of my teaching and all that, probably you've noticed, by word pictures.
Yeah.
Um, and so I always tell the story of the grandmother or the husband watching the wife cooking a pot roast. And the first thing she does is she cuts the ends off of each side of the pot roast before she puts it in the pan. And so he asks her, "Why do you do that?" She says, "Oh, I don't know. That's why the way my mother did it." He gets curious. He calls up his mother-in-law and says, uh, "When you make a roast and you cut the ends off, does that help the flavor? Does that? I mean, what does it do?" She goes, "No, it's just that my husband used to buy 10-pound roasts, and my pan would only hold an 8-pound roast. You know, we just passed something down that we didn't know."
You don't even think about it, and I'm sure I have. But I'm massively into cooking at the moment, and I'm
Yeah,
just
oh,
thinking so many
good. Now
things.
we have something in common.
More than one, I think.
Yeah.
And Brian, one thing I think about, and it just
Hmm.
relates to that specific moment, is when you live with housemates, as I've done in
Hmm.
London. It's a very common thing to do. You room up with people, you don't know
Hmm.
them. And it's living with a housemate is learning what each parent told them goes in the fridge and what goes outside of the
Yes.
fridge.
Yes.
And it's so
Exactly.
relatable. It's the old one with bread, eggs. I know people that put bread in the fridge. I know people that put eggs in the fridge. And
Yeah.
it's just you do what's passed down to you and you don't question the why.
Right. And so that's where I get with the why people, is get them in a room and say, "Why do we do all of what we do? Um, what's the value to it? How does it furthering the business? Um, how did we get into the problems we're having?" And sometimes, I don't want people to think that fixing something is really this crisis management, everybody's in crisis. I deal with clients who just can't seem to grow,
Yeah.
or um, or they're doing well, but they just don't have a healthy culture in their business. Um, those are things that can be fixed. And so, as a corporate fixer, parachuting in, fixing the problem, but you're not hiring me for the next 20 years. Hopefully you get it and move on. So it's a lot of word pictures. I use mnemonics, memorization techniques. I use acronyms a lot, not because it's cool and hip, but because somebody can remember, um, summing up communication skills as ACME, ACME. Speak with authority, communicate clearly, manage expectations.
I
And
I can imagine you have a whole host of frameworks that you've been working
yes,
with.
yeah, over the years, and I have ones that work and ones that don't. But I find that the average worker, the average person in a business, whether you're middle management or whether you're on a shop floor, um, they can learn those, and they can take it with them. And it's almost like a school teacher. I walk in and I say, "How do you communicate?" And they'll say, "Acme." And I say, "Are you doing that? Um, did you manage the expectations of the customer? Um, were you the authority, or did you just kind of mutter something, and now you don't understand why they didn't follow your instructions?" That type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And look, you've been
Yeah.
doing this for 40 years. Is there a
Yes.
pattern that you see across all the companies you work with who are potentially distressed, regardless of what industry they're in, if they're family owned or not family owned?
Yes. Kind of the key common denominators are, a lack of understanding of everything else besides the product. Okay, the processes of administrating a business, um, communication skills. Like I said, most business owners, they built a business because they had a great product or service or something that they do for their customers, and everything else has had to be learned or filled in. And that's you're really only as good as a function of the people you've hired to do that job. Um, so the pattern really is, um, that people are locked into certain ways of thinking,
Yeah.
and they can't look out beyond that and see that there might be, um, a way around the problem. They can't figure out how to get there. They know what they know there was a problem, but they may not understand the underlying reasons behind the problem or why it keeps happening
Yeah.
and why they're stuck. You mentioned change management. The hardest part of change management is not managing the physical change or the actual change. It's managing the change of the way the people think. Because if you can't get them to see another way to think about it, you're not going to successfully implement the actual changes to operations or whatever that need to take
Yeah.
place.
And this is where your education piece comes in.
Yeah.
It's huge, and it's probably no easy feat, and dealing with all sorts of personality types, and you probably
Yeah.
have some sort of framework that you work to of your own in terms of how do I deal with this personality.
Yeah. That's a whole nother podcast in terms of, how I classify people. But yeah, you after your initial conversations, when you ask people, a business owner or an executive, um, about the problem and how they perceive it, you can kind of tell how they think,
Yeah.
um, how they're approaching it. I One last kind of classification thing I use is that there are different management styles. There are different styles with the owners or executives. Um, there's abdicators, who just kind of abdicate everything and let it
Yeah.
run. Or there are meddlers, um, who are into every little minutia of the business in the way that the employees almost feel irrelevant. Um, there's the combination abdicator meddler who abdicates for so long and then they feel like it's out of control, then they begin to meddle. And you try to want to turn those people in all of that into people who are more coaches and leaders, um, who can hire good people around them, motivate them, and trust them to do what
That yeah.
implement the vision.
That was the whole time we've been talking. I was thinking, like, what is one of Brian's end metrics? And it's probably one that's maybe not associated with revenue so much. It's more associated with, have I trained this person effectively that this problem won't arise
Right.
again because they can coach other people around them?
Right. And it could be a lack of sales. Yes, it could be financial. But what's underneath that? Um, you know, Financial problems don't just happen to you unless you have a disaster that comes in and
Yeah.
you've got to figure out how to deal with it. Um, they creep in slowly because of habits or practices that you do. Um, One of the first questions I ask my customers: do you make money selling your product before you pay anything else? Materials and labor, is that profitable? Because if you're not making money on what you're selling, you can cut all the administrative costs you want out of the picture. You can
Yeah.
change everything you want, um, but you haven't addressed the top line fundamental problem, which is I'm not selling my product to either to enough people or for enough money, um, to cover the costs of what it makes cost to make it. That's the first place you start, in terms of operational direction. And you could tell what, kind of stepping back, you can tell when somebody gets that or doesn't. Um, I almost always hear, if we just had more money, if we could get a loan, if that's just the common thing, is something external is going to make this right. Um, but the problem could be, are you empowering your salespeople? Did you hire the right people? Do you have the right metrics to measure their success? Um, there's something underlying that if my sales are flagging, or is my product becoming obsolete and I'm refusing to see it because I'm in love with my product.
I, I
Um,
think that happens a lot.
I have, I had, fortunately, I'm now out. I had a client that was heavy in robotics, and they were so enamored with all of the patents and the technology they had and all of that, um, and they immediately went public, um, after the first year. And my advice was, hold off. We've got some things we fix. Well, the market is punishing them right now because they don't have the underlying, fundamentals of, uh, good people in the business. And the only thing is that the executives who are there, all they can talk about is how phenomenal their robotics are and how, everybody's going to want this, but they haven't demonstrated how they're going to get there, nor have they shown they have the people in place and the structures in place to manage, uh, any kind of rapid growth. Their answer was, all we need is money. So
but it's a
Uh,
people fixer. It's
yeah,
always it 9 times out of 10 sounds like it's always gonna come
right,
down to being a people problem.
right. And I think I'm hearing all this. Tie this into AI, obviously. Um, I'm an older guy. I mean, I'm 66. No chance I'm retiring, but I've been there. When I haven't done this for 40 years, you can't be that young. When I started in my first real office job or whatever, we got one of the first fax machines,
Yeah.
and it was about the size of your desk. Um, I've lived through all the technology revolution here, and I'm trying to keep up with it and learn um, and understand it. And I think I do a pretty good job. But the new challenge is AI, and some people are very afraid of it. Some
You
people
embrace
think
it.
it's going to fix everything.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
I said you gotta embrace it.
You cut out there. Yeah, but you have to understand what it's good for you. Um, it's not a one size fits all. Um, it's a great tool, but the question is, am I using it for research? Am I using it to assist me in marketing? Am I using it for lead generation? Am I using it to replace um, people? In functions. It's not a one size fits all, and I do hear from time to time clients, well, AI's this is going to be great. We're going to implement AI, and they have no idea what they're talking about. Um,
You're giving me
I,
a perfect segue into to
yeah,
1760. And
yeah,
that's where we sit. We sit as that layer for founders who don't have the bandwidth and time to go and learn a load of new AI systems,
right.
understand where their own gaps are and how to implement them and train themselves on them, because it's a huge
Hmm.
gap. It's like someone who's focusing on deliverables the whole time and focusing on accounting or whatever it may be, whatever hat they're wearing for their own organization. AI is just another thing for them to go learn and understand. And you hit the nail on the head there. It's a tool for people to go and use. It's not a magic wand, but it can diagnose certain problems, but you've just got to know what those problems are, and
Hmm.
that's where we really help.
Right. Yeah. And you know, uh, early days in the computers, we used to say GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. Um,
I've heard that
AI's,
before.
yeah. I mean, if you put in garbage into your system, you're going to get garbage out. Uh, AI is always learning, but it's only going to learn what it's been given. When you do AI for research,
Yeah,
like, or just a simple Google search, um, very carefully understanding what you're asking it to do and giving it the right parameters is just as important, which means you have to understand why you need the AI. And then it's just simply going to do the job more efficiently because of its speed and its constant learning and adding to its own database, all of that. But it's not a magic elixir yet. Um, but I'm sure learning and studying how can I use it in my business. I'm also looking at how can I use it in my clients' businesses.
yeah.
Um, um, and that's where what you do is very fascinating to me. And I certainly can see sometime soon I'm going to be sending a client to you saying they need to learn how to use AI in their business. And
Yeah, and
my understanding is rudimentary.
we're here to help the founders grow, and you're in the business of helping people as much as we're in the business of helping people. So
Right.
I wanted to finish on kind of like a two-pronged question for you, as I think this will be
Hmm.
valuable. And one thing I'm learning from this conversation is you've got a vast amount of experience. So with your 40 years experience of turning around in coaching, one, what's the piece of advice you'd find yourself giving most often? And then number two, if any business owners are listening right now and thinking, I need help for my company, what's the first thing they should do before picking up the phone?
I think the thing that uh, I tell my clients most often is you need to take a step back and you need to look at whatever it is your problem, your business, whatever it is, from not not what they always say, a 35,000-foot view, but really from your next door neighbor when they perceive, or the business next to you or your customer. Take a step back and look at it from their perspective
Yeah.
and say, um, you know, is there a different way to look at this? I mean, that's the number one thing is there's there's always a different way to look at it and then figure out what works because what you're doing isn't working or you wouldn't be having the problem. That's not an insult to them. It's
No.
simply that's what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. Um, so that's and I say that to even people think they wanted to contact me that I'm going to immediately come in and fix a problem. We're going to have some conversations, so you might as well start by thinking through it. You might see a solution and don't even need to pay me to come in, you know. Um, and so at that point, I become more of a counselor, teacher, coach than the guy who's just going to sit at the desk and make everything perfect.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's really where I'm seeing more and less hands-on, but more motivating, leading, teaching, growing, listening to my clients. They can do some of that themselves if they take a step back and look at their business from
This is
the man on the street's perspective. Not their attorneys, not their accountants, not McKinsey. No offense to the guys at McKinsey, but just look at it yourself and say, is there a different way to do this?
yeah. I think there's something very relatable
So,
to a lot of the other podcasts I've had on the show. Well, I'll get another guest that I've had on the podcast show.
yeah, I'm
But
sorry, you're
it's
cutting out just a little bit.
apologies. I think one of our internets might be going down a little bit, but probably
Yeah,
stable.
technology at its best. You're pixelating on me.
The
I think we're having some technical difficulties. Yeah, you disappeared.
hello.